Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new video here on the second channel. Today, we're going to look at some of the best rogue decks you can play right now. If you're getting bored of the current standard format and want to have a little bit of fun and mix things up, but still stay at a decent competitive level, I have 7 rogue decks to show off right now in the format that these rogue decks conceivably could get day 2 at a regional championships and can keep up with some of the top decks in the format. In this video, I'm going to go over why each deck is good enough to keep up and why they're decent enough to see a little bit of play right now. And hopefully, this video gives you some inspiration to try out some of these decks for yourself if you are, of course, getting bored of the format. And let me know in the comments below what your favorite rogue deck is right now to play in our current format. I'd be interested to hear, of course. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We're on the road to 19K subs here. And yeah, let's get into the video. All right, the first rogue deck I want to show off is Conkeldurr. Now, Conkeldurr actually ends up being pretty solid, as Conkeldurr can do a ton of damage. It does 250 damage if it's affected by a special condition. However, it can attack for 0 energy. Now, this build was able to get day 2 at one of the recent regional championships, and it's definitely a pretty strong archetype because Conkeldurr can do so much damage. In fact, with the help of the Binding Mochi and even the Gravity Mountain, you're one-hit KOing most big EX Pokemon. Even stuff like Charizard EX and Dragapult EX can get KO'd by Conkeldurr. The fact that Conkeldurr doesn't really need any energy to attack is what makes it so strong. Much like Cloth, however, you are relying very heavily on that Brute Bonnet to help you get poison damage onto your Conkeldurr. But once you kind of get to that point, Conkeldurr can kind of just sweep through your opponent's board. If they're not dealing with the Brute Bonnet, like Conkeldurr just one-hit KOs anything in the active spot. Not to mention, it is a one-prizer, which helps offset the prize trade. The addition of Pidgeot in the deck is interesting over playing something like the Bibarel engine. The Pidgeot just gives you more consistency at finding rare candy Conkeldurr, because that's all you really need to do with the deck is just constantly chain rare candy Conkeldurr. You don't really need anything fancy, just find your candy pieces and your stage 2 pieces. Now, interestingly enough, to set up the deck, it does play a Precious Trolley. One of the downsides about playing Conkeldurr, there's no 70 HP Timber, right? You can't Buddy Poffin for the Timber, so the deck does play the Precious Trolley to help set up your Conkeldurrs a lot more easily. You can easily Trolley for Brute Bonnet, Pidgey, a couple Timbers, and you get Rotom, and you can instant charge to help build up your hand. The deck does play the Town Store to also help find the Body Mochis and the Ancient Booster Capsules to chain together the Conkeldurr attacks every turn. And like I said, Conkeldurr can hit really, really hard. It could technically be considered a slower version of Cloth, but it does do more damage than Cloth and can actually take bigger knockouts as opposed to Cloth, where sometimes you're just not reaching high numbers on like massive Pokemon like Charizard EX, where Conkeldurr can hit those high numbers, and definitely seems like it's a pretty solid deck to play right now. All right, next up, we got Yoshi Tate's Day 2 Toronto Regional finishing Hydreigon EX deck. I want to show off Hydreigon in some form because I know Hydreigon has been doing pretty good in online tournaments, and while the deck hasn't really had a massive performance yet at a regional, obviously just kind of gets gate-kept pretty hard by Teal Mask Ogerpon and Raging Bolt and stuff, the deck definitely does still seem like it's a pretty solid deck outside of having some awkward matchups, and Yoshi Tate has so far the highest placement with a Hydreigon deck at a regional championships. And I do like his list a lot. He has a lot going on. He does have the Dusknoir in the deck. Dusknoir can support Hydreigon's attack Obsidian, which of course can do a ton of damage to the bench. One thing that Yoshi did play in the deck is also the 1/1 Toedscruel. Toedscruel is a really good counter right now to those annoying oppressive decks like Reggie Drago and Goldengo and Raging Bull, where you're shutting off Pokestop, Legacy Star, and Superior Energy Retrieval, which can make a difference with Hydreigon. Hydreigon doesn't do a lot of damage. I know it does have Obsidian, but its first attack, Crushing Headbutt, only does 200 damage. So sometimes you fall short of a knockout by only doing 200 damage. That's where the Toedscruel can help you out, because it balances out your opponent not being able to just constantly run through all of your Hydreigons with Raging Bulls or Goldengos, and it does help in that situation too against Reggie Drago, where you shut off their Legacy Star to slow them down a little bit. The addition of Dusknoir is nice, because again, you can use it for extra damage output for Hydreigon, or you can also use it to do extra damage with Obsidian, which is really, really good. In Yoshi's list, he also plays a Blood Moon Ursaluna as a nice late-game attacker. You do need a little bit of late-game firepower in the deck. I feel like Hydreigon is strong, but sometimes can't get the job done. But Blood Moon can definitely help out with that late game a little bit more. The deck obviously still plays Pidgeot, does have the Peckron in the deck. Peckron just gives you an auto-win against Stall Control. You can literally just sit there, loop Hydreigon with Peckron every turn, and just start milling their deck. Like, they can't really beat that at all. And then, of course, you got the normal Fez Rotom package usually you would see within a Stage 2 deck. The one thing with Yoshi's deck, he's not playing a Xerosic or Eerie or Misfortune Sisters, which some Hydreigon lists do tend to play right now. Just kind of wanted to keep it a little bit more simple, kind of more leaning into the aspect of abusing Obsidian as opposed to using the Mill Attack in combination with other Disruption cards, which I do like the idea of that. And definitely try out Yoshi's list if you haven't already, and if you're a fan of Hydreigon. I just did a video on this deck on the main channel, but I do want to highlight Blood Moon Ursaluna Iron Valiant within today's video, because some people may not have seen that video. But yeah, Blood Moon Ursaluna is a pretty strong fighting type attacker. I guess one theme I wanted to highlight with some of these rogue decks is fighting types are pretty solid right now, and another pretty solid fighting deck you can play is Blood Moon Ursaluna with Iron Valiant. Of course, Blood Moon does have that attack Mad Bite that does 100 plus 30 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. The gimmick of the deck is use Iron Valiant's ability to put damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon, and then you knock them out with Blood Moon. The nice thing with Blood Moon is itself sufficient ability to power itself up. Blood Moon does require 3 energy, but its ability allows you to play it from your hand and then attach 2 energy from your hand onto the Blood Moon, which really does help quite a bit. This is a little bit different than the build I did a video on from Toronto. It was from an online tournament, but I do like the idea of playing Surfer in the deck. One of the things with Iron Valiant is, while its ability is nice, you do need to constantly switch it in on the active spot, and that's where having the Surfer can come in handy. The only thing I really don't know about the list is really the Cornerstone Ogerpon, which both this list and the one from Toronto did play the Ogerpon. I'm not sold on Cornerstone Ogerpon. Like, I know you need it against opposing Ogerpons or even Mimikyu. Well, I guess not Mimikyu, but other Ogerpons. But I honestly don't know if you really need it. Like, the only way to really utilize it is with Thornton, right? You can go Blood Moon, put energy on it, attach Thornton into the Cornerstone. I'm not sold on that yet, though, but I do like the idea of Blood Moon Ursaluna right now. It's definitely a strong attacker. It can do some big damage with just 2 Iron Valiant pings. Usually you're knocking out most big basics in the format. With 3 Iron Valiant pings, you're starting to do even bigger damage onto bigger Pokemon like the Pidgeots and the Dragapults and the Charizard and stuff, which does make it a pretty big threat. And it is a 1-prizer, so if your opponent cannot gust around the Blood Moon for the turn, they have to attack into the Blood Moon. It can really offset the prize trade, which is also what makes this deck so strong. With the help of cards like Energy Retrieval and Lana's Aid, it's really easy to constantly chain a Blood Moon or Ursalunas every single turn. It ends up being a pretty decent attacking deck. Also, it has the ability to donk the opponent. Sometimes you can get Term and Blood Moon knockouts out of nowhere going second. It is very possible for that to happen. Of all the new cards from Searching Sparks, it does feel like Archadon is just so close to actually being a competitive meta deck, but it hasn't quite got there yet. However, it has been doing okay in some of the recent regionals. This is actually the highest placing Archadon Dialga list I could find from recent regionals, and of course, it does seem pretty good as you compare it with Dialga V-Star, which obviously these cards have pretty natural synergy together. Dialga V-Star can be easily powered up with the help of Archadon's ability. When you evolve it from your Drowdon, you can attach Metal Energy onto your Dialga V-Star, and out of nowhere, potentially by, your second turn of the game, you can build up a Star Chronos out of nowhere. And Star Chronos is one of the strongest attacks you could utilize right now if you can find a way to consistently build it up. Of course, Star Chronos can allow you to potentially decimate your opponent's board, or, of course, you can take 4 prizes. You can even win the game with the Star Chronos if all goes well. You can also use Metal Blast in Dialga 2 as a great way to just do a ton of damage. I mean, Archadon isn't that bad of an attacker either, however, though it does have that attack that is 220 damage, and if worse comes to worse, you can always power up your own Archadon with its own ability, and then you can do 220. The deck does have the double Turbo in the deck, which is really good to reuse your Archadons to either heal it, or you can, of course, use it to pick it up to then re-evolve it to put even more energy into play. But I guess, like, the one thing is when you're playing Archadon with Dialga is you're using Archadon's ability to put energy onto the Dialga, not the Archadon, so it's just kind of a sitting duck. So having the extra Turos does help in that situation. The deck does play the Precious Trolley A-Spec card, obviously just to get you your Duraludons out and your Dialga, since you can't really use Poffin or anything. To get there, you can just Trolley for them instead. You do have the 4 Arven in the deck to help find that Precious Trolley to set up your Dialgas, and if you can get that turn 2 Star Chronos off, a lot of the time, you are winning a lot of games. And this deck definitely feels like there is something there, and Archadon is just so close to actually being a meta deck. One deck I wanted to mention, too, was actually Great Tusk Mill. Now, I'm actually going to be using the list I did a video on with this deck last week for today's video, but I really like the idea of Great Tusk Mill right now. I do feel like this deck is fairly underrated. It's probably one of the better mill decks you can play. Of course, being a mill deck is nice. Some decks are kind of annoyed by just constantly getting milled, like Goldango, Lost Box, stuff like that. Don't appreciate getting milled. But one of the things I like about Great Tusk is how you can build your Great Tusk around having the ability to lock your opponent out of the game in the late game. Cards like the Mimikyu can be really good. If you mill all your opponent's attackers, sometimes you can literally just stick a Mimikyu into the active spot, and your opponent will have no way to win the game because there's a Mimikyu there and they have no way to attack it, and you can infinitely loop your deck with Pidgeot V to never deck out. Also, Mawile ends up being a really cool idea, too. I really like the idea of Mawile within Mill because, of course, you can run all of your opponent out of their switching cards with Great Tusk's attack, and then eventually you can just stick a Mawile in play, trap something in the active spot that your opponent put on the bench, and then you can just deck your opponent out with the help of Mawile. I like the Rotom in the deck, too. Just being able to remove items from your opponent's hand is really strong, and, of course, we do have the Eerie in the deck as another way to control the opponent's hand. The big card, though, is that neutralization zone, because you can run your opponent out of stadiums right now, and honestly, sometimes your opponent doesn't have enough stadiums to even keep up with 3 Artisan, but if you can stick that neutralization zone into play, and you've milled all your opponent's stadiums with the help of Great Tusk Mill, your opponent literally cannot do anything, and you can just sit there and just mill them over and over. At that point, you won't even have to really chain the supporters every turn to make Great Tusk Mill 4 cards. You can just sit there, mill 1 card at a time, with the neutralization zone in play, and eventually your opponent will just deck out. Neutralization zone is very, very strong within the Tusk mill deck. If you prize it, it's not so good, but if you don't prize it, it is nice to have. It is cool because you do have the Mimikyu in the deck also, but the neutralization zone just makes it even easier to win the game. I really like Great Tusk Mill. I think it's a fairly underrated mill deck. I definitely think you should give it a try if you haven't already. I'm a big fan of the Reggie deck, and actually Reggie's a fairly solid rogue deck right now, as this could be one of the best ways not only to play the Reggies, but also just to play Pikachu EX in general as an attacker. Pikachu EX is a very strong attacker. That can be annoying to deal with, because some decks really don't have a way to break that ability, right? And if you can't do that, you can just sit there and spam the attack Topaz Bolt every turn. And we can actually build up Pikachu with the help of Regigigas. Regigigas has an ability where you do need all 6 Reggies in play, but then if you do, you can put energy from the discard onto one of your Pokemon. Now, of course, without the Pikachu, well, you can only have 6 Reggies. How are you getting the Pikachu down? Well, the gimmick of the deck is utilizing the Area Zero Underdepth Stadium, where, of course, you could have all 6 Reggies in play on top of having the Pikachu EX. And if your opponent doesn't remove the Area Zero Underdepth, well, all your Reggies stay on the board. You can just sit there and constantly load up Pikachu every single turn with Regigigas' ability. Another cool gimmick in the deck is actually the Radiant Greninja. Greninja is nice because you need to discard energy in order to put energy in the discard for Gigas' ability, and Greninja also ends up being a pretty strong attacker, giving you a little bit of snipe potential. We do have that Regieleki in the deck for Master Radiance, which does have a snipe attack, but Greninja's just even stronger, because if you can pull off like a turn 1 Moonlight Shuriken, it's kind of insane, and that's one of the cool things with Greninja, is multi-use purpose, being able to not only do snipe attacks, but also can discard energy to draw you cards to set up Regigigas, and also set up turn 1 Reggies. Another deck that can easily attack on the first turn of the game if you pop off. The helpfulness of the pop-off is with the help of Precious Trolley, where you can use Precious Trolley to get all the Reggies in play at once. If you have the Area Zero down with the Pikachu in play and you find your Trolley, you get all the Reggies out immediately without needing to find them as quickly. The deck does have the 4 Nest Ball and the 2 Ultra Ball and the 2 Heavy Ball to help find your Reggies to get them down quickly, but the Trolley does make a big difference. The other cool thing in the deck is that Cypher Maniac to find what you need. One of the problems with this deck sometimes is chaining Area Zero Underdepth. If your opponent does actually have a way to keep up in the stadium, or it can be difficult to keep Area Zero into play, but that's where we do have the Cypher Maniac, where we can use Cypher Maniac with Regidrago's ability or Greninja's ability to easily guarantee that we're going to find the Area Zero Underdepth on the following turn, which is really, really good. Being able to just guarantee Area Zero is really good, because you can chain it, and if you can chain Area Zero, this deck can honestly be pretty unstoppable once it sets up, and it's definitely a very fun deck to play right now. All right, and the last rogue deck I wanted to highlight was actually another one of my own creations. That is my Bayet Poison deck here. Now, this deck is really cool, and I've already seen some people play it IRL and have decent success with it at League Challenges, and I think Bayet has the potential to work well with the Poison package, because you can make your item lock attack hit even harder. Now, much like the Conkeldurr deck, the idea of the deck is use Brute Bonnet with Binding Mochi to poison your Bayet, and then you put the Binding Mochi on your Bayet so that the Bayet can do even more damage with its Everlasting Darkness item lock attack. Item locking your opponent while poisoning them and hitting them really hard seems kind of deadly, and that's what makes this deck so strong. But the other really cool thing about the deck is the ability to get the item lock off immediately. Now, of course, you can use Shuppet. If you go second, usually you'd have to flip a coin to item lock them if your opponent were to go first. But if you go first, you get that turn where it's like, okay, I can guarantee item lock next turn. But within this deck, you have the Call Bell Salvatore combo. So if you go second, you can immediately go Salvatore. Salvatore allows you to immediately evolve into the Bayet. You can go into the Bayet, and then you can immediately go for that turn 1 item lock with Salvatore, which is so, so strong. And that's one of the cool things about this deck. We do have that precious Trolley in there to set up your board. Trolley's really good with Brute Bonnet. Also, we got Latias in the deck. We got the Sneasler, the Baby Pecker. And sometimes, if you're not item locking, maybe you just go for the Pecker on Donk instead, which seems pretty good. And then, of course, we do have the addition of the Blood Moon as a nice late game attacker. Another cool thing too with the item lock, if you're really not always getting the item lock off, sometimes you can use Bayet's second attack, which can do a ton of damage if your opponent's hand is pretty big, and of course you can increase that damage with the help of Binding Mochi. This is one of my favorite creations. I really do like this deck right now, much like the great Tusk Mill I showed off on the channel. I really like the idea of this item lock Bayet deck, and is it better than maybe the Gardevoir build? I'm not too sure, but item lock Bayet with Poison seems kind of cool, because that damage can really rack up, and if your opponent can't play items, their deck can't function. This can also be a very annoying deck to play against, especially when you can pull it off on your first turn with the help of Salvatore. And there you have it. Those are some of the best rogue decks that you can play right now in our current format. Again, if you're getting bored of the format and want to kind of mix things up and have a little bit of fun, definitely give these decks a try, because some of these decks can do some pretty crazy things, like taking knockouts in the first turn of the game, milling your opponent's resources, and getting turn 1 item locks. Some pretty crazy things can happen with some of these rogue decks. If you want to have some fun right now, definitely give these decks a try. Maybe you need like a fun deck to bring to like a league challenge or something. Definitely try out one of these 7 decks that I have listed in today's video. But y'all, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if you're interested in seeing more videos like this where I look at rogue decks, let me know in the comments below. I'd be definitely interested to see. And if you got any other rogue decks that maybe I missed out on talking about in this video, let me know in the comments below. I'm interested to hear. I considered maybe doing Sarah Ledge, because technically it's a rogue deck, but Surge I think is actually like competitive enough and popular enough to not consider a rogue deck, even though it kind of falls under the rogue status right now, but it's not really considered a rogue deck in my opinion. But yeah, let me know your thought of the video. If you're new to the channel, subscribe down below. We're on the road to 19K subscribers. Also, check out my Pokemon TCG Pocket channel if you want to go get some extra content from me too. I just made a Pocket channel. Make sure to go subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on another video very soon. Bye-bye.